It's finals week, and with everything on the line, the Melbourne Stars, and maybe just Glenn Maxwell, lit up the MCG.
Maxwell swings, doesn't need to leave the crease. Why would you?
And now all eyes turn to the qualifier to see who can lock in that home fortress. We preview this week's matches with Brad Hodge. It's the business end of the season in the Big Bash. This is The Surge. G'day everyone and welcome to The Surge. We're through the home and away season. We are now into the finals. And we've got 4 teams left to see who takes out BBL 14. I'm Adam White and I'm joined by Brad Hodge as we look back at what was a roller coaster weekend and start to look ahead to the finals. Hodgie, welcome.
Yeah, Adam, howdy. How's things? Good?
Oh, I'm very well, but the Stars, your team, they got there.
Yeah, in the
Never
end.
in doubt.
Well, there was a lot of doubt actually, but they got there in the end. What did I predicted they'd win the tournament here about 5 weeks ago, and they
laughed at maybe 3 weeks ago.
Correct. 2024 wasn't their season or year. 2025 might be something different. And I'll tell you what, they've actually got a real red hot chance to be able to, have a big impact in this finals. And I'm super happy for all those involved at, the Melbourne Stars and the effort they've put in. And and to be honest, as a Victorian, good to see a Melbourne club in the finals.
And a big crowd there for the last game against the Hurricanes at the MCG. So it shows I'm not saying they're a sleeping giant, but it shows the interest that there is there in the team.
Over 32,000 there yesterday at the MCG. Nice, beautiful conditions. And to be able to track that is important. I said, I think, earlier on in the podcast a few weeks ago that the Stars are a big club and they need to be performing well. And if you cast your mind back to when Shane Warne led it and had that sort of star power about it, well, they've got some stars there. And everyone just sort of needed to jump on the back of Glenn Maxwell and Marcus Stoinis and a few other big hitters. And it's proved that they need to become extremely serious about the future and make this MCG a fortress. I thought their bowling was outstanding yesterday, and that's something they haven't been able to do in past years. And make it a tough venue for people to come and play. It's a hard ground. It's a big ground, and the dimensions are pretty different to other stadiums. So good performance. As you mentioned, led on the back of Glenn Maxwell, but his individual brilliance has been astonishing. 27 sixes, I think, or 26 sixes so far in this tournament, but also the leadership of Marcus Stoinis. I think he stepped up to the plate this year, and going 0-5 would have been a tough challenge to actually mentally turn that around, and they've done a great job.
It's a real baptism of fire for Stoinis to start his job as captain, lose the first 5.
Yeah,
that's going to test anyone's confidence, let alone someone that's never done it before in the BBL.
Yeah, and test the dressing room as well.
Yeah,
because I'm pretty sure that we're all individuals and have our thoughts about how everyone else can do their job. And I'm sure there was some whispers in the dressing room that maybe if Glenn was captain or someone else was captain, then it could have we could have been getting some wins on the board. So they've done well to actually manage any of that sort of backroom chat. And speaking with Marcus yesterday, he was pretty clear on whether they were winning or losing, that he just wanted everyone to show up and make sure they were ready for the contest regardless of the win or loss. So, that was his message. And clearly in 2025, they've been able to do that. So, yeah, positive stuff.
Just one more on the Stars before we get into the power play. And I've got another question for you. It's interesting the real emotion and passion that you're starting to see from the Stars after taking wickets, after, big performances with the bat, after wins. It kind of feels like there's a bit more substance to them, that it's not just, let's put on a show. If we win or lose, it doesn't matter. Now, that's a perception thing, not necessarily reality.
It's a real perception.
But you're seeing it now, and we're seeing an intensity from them that I can't remember seeing for quite some time from this team.
It's a good observation, actually. I reckon that's been a real frustration in the past. And I guess there's been a few people that have been sort of working around that inner sanctum, trying to work out what's been going wrong. And I don't know much the way they train or their methodology around that. But in the past, I think that it's been a slightly casual. Whether that's changed or not, I'm not sure. It does look like there's a level of intensity that's been brought to the game this year. And I'm not sure whether that's on the back of losing the first 5. But there was still intensity in the team even though they were losing.
Yep.
So particularly in the field, even with the ball and the bat, execution might have been off a fraction, but you can see that there was a different sort of mentality. And what I loved about it, talking to Trent Copeland here just last week, was that vision that he had about we're here to win.
Yeah.
Like that's the cornerstone of sport. And I won't question the Stars whether that was in their mind in the past, but it looked like it wasn't as desperate as it should have been.
Entertain first, win second.
Yes, and that's not the way sport is. Sport, you're governed by a performance of a win-loss. Part of that win-loss is entertainment, so it can be a little bit lost in translation, but for me, yeah, so far this year, they're there to win.
All right, so before we get into the power play, we've got 4 left. Are they the right 4, do you feel? Because it has been a very even competition throughout, and obviously it went down to the last game as to who made finals. But now we've got the 4.
Yep.
So we've got the Hurricanes, the Sixers, throw in obviously the Stars, and then the Thunder in third spot. Is that the best 4?
It feels right. Yes, it does feel like they are the best sides. Certainly as well, I would have been left frustrated again if someone snuck into the finals with a less than 50% win-loss ratio.
Yeah.
That can happen, and it's a bit of a killer for me because it's like you've underperformed so bad, but yet you're in the finals. So everyone has actually achieved that. 5 wins to get into the finals is a minimum, I think, is good. Stars snuck in there. You look at the bottom 4, well, Heat really haven't fired.
They had their chances.
No, they had their chances. They're batting. They've had a few injuries as well. The Melbourne Renegades just went through a slump and had challenges, with particular conditions that they faced. So that was a challenge for them. Scorchers saw them actually uncharacteristically make some errors which we're not used to.
I think that's the best word to describe the Scorchers, uncharacteristic.
Yeah, it's just there was a few chinks in their armour this year. I'm not sure why or how, but they made some errors on field which normally you don't see, whether it was choices when they were under pressure, whether it was the bowling execution. I mean, we've seen some of their best bowlers getting clocked around at 10, 12 and over, which is just unheard of. So for them, not so good. And then we've got strikers who just didn't really recover actually after Daniel Sams took down load. It actually did because they went with this, spin strong heavy, and that sort of backfired after a while and didn't have the impact that they wanted. And then Matt Shaw missed a couple of games, and their bowling unit came under pressure as well. So it just didn't stack up.
All right, so that's a little bit of a look at the teams that didn't make it and obviously the teams that did. But getting into the power play, I'm going to skew this a little bit with the Melbourne Stars. We've sort of spoken about them as a team, but the number one agenda item for me is Glenn Maxwell.
Yeah.
Do you think he is actually playing better than he's ever played in this form of the game?
Well, he has periods in his game where this happens. And when you play such an expansive game like Glenn and a high risk, it doesn't look high risk at the moment, but trust me, hitting 7 sixes or 6 sixes in a game is high risk. And you're going to go through periods where it's going to work for you and not. It's an absolute roller coaster. And he's right at the top of the moment, hitting the ball beautifully. His clarity in his batting is actually really clear. So that's working for him. And I mean, how do you judge what he's doing now compared to T20 World Cups that he's played in before? And
well I think
he goes on a heater.
Yeah, to answer that question, I think it's more the consistency of him doing this high risk approach, high voltage approach, but to do it as consistently is in what he's doing is, I feel, quite remarkable.
It's a good analysis to get that high risk consistency. Yeah,
you don't need to do it that often.
No, and that's probably where people need to give the slack a little bit to someone like Jade Fraser McGurk. It's not going to be consistent. You're going to have highs and lows and ups and downs. And for Glenn to be able to pull off this consistency is actually really good at the moment. When he walks to the crease, doesn't look like he's going to get out. So that's a great space to be in. And you can see the apprehension or the nervousness in the bowlers because they know that as well. They can sense it. And normally you can see if he's not in 100% great consistent form, slightly vulnerable early, particularly against quicks, doesn't look like the way at all at the moment. So he's just enjoying his cricket. I think that being relieved of the captaincy has actually been a really positive thing. Just to be able to take a step back, concentrate a little bit more on your own game and not worry about the other, squad members that are either struggling or doing well. So that's part of being a captain. You've really got to nurture those people through the highs and lows. So it's been a good thing for him just to sit back, do his thing and perform for his team.
So when you watch him play, for someone that has the experience that you've had at the highest level, are you sitting back going, how is he doing this? Or what is that? Like, I'm interested from your point of view, if someone has said that's done it all yourself, to see what he's doing at the moment. What's going through your mind?
Well, it's the thing that is running through my mind is that he's been able to predict what the bowlers are actually going to deliver. And you often say that don't try and premeditate. Well, he's in a space where he can actually premeditate because he's sort of run through all the analysis of what the bowlers are going to deliver. And he's getting the balls exactly where he wants them. Then he's good enough to dispatch it over the fence. So, yeah, that's a really rare place to be in. So that's the one thing which I've sort of looked and gone, the bowlers are just, they're under so much pressure that they haven't got clarity themselves about what they're trying to achieve against Glenn. They're just thinking about how I don't go for 6, not how do I get him out or how do I get him off strike. So they're missing those executions by a mile. And it's been fun to watch because when they do miss, it disappears into the members' stand at the MCG. So as a batting professional, I guess, that just loves watching, good cricket, it's a good place to be in to watch him not even miss hit 6s. They're going out of the middle of the bat. Yeah. So that's astonishing. His stillness at the crease is actually really important. Not moving around too much. When he sometimes tries to get too funky, he can miss opportunities. But no, it's good hitting. It's really cool cricket, baseball, mixed with a few other things of hockey, whatever you want to chuck in there, tennis. It's got everything.
It has. All right, the Super Saturday roller coaster, and you referenced Jake Fraser McGurk before, and for a moment there, it looked like the Renegades were going to qualify for the finals from a very difficult position against the Heat. So on Fraser McGurk first, and then the second part of the conversation is around, it felt like finally the Renegades got conditions that suited the team that they've got, even though a few have gone home and have left, that the style they want to play was able to be played because of the conditions that were served up.
100%. Yeah, that was critical actually, that 5:00 afternoon match where
sun out on the
pitch.
You
could see the sun on the pitch, so clearly there was no moisture around. It didn't dew up at night, so conditions were fair for both sides. There was no moisture in the wicket, and it gave everyone an opportunity to actually play cricket the way they wanted to. Or not the way they wanted to, the way the team was set up to play.
Yeah.
So that's an important thing. What I will say, though, is if you do know those conditions, they haven't adapted either. Mm-hmm. So other teams have come and taken points off them. You've still got to play on the same surface as everyone else. The Marvel pitch, unfortunately, is determined by the toss greatly. Yes. So that's a bit of an issue. So how you rectify that, I'm not 100% sure, but it is a huge toss to win or lose, no matter whether you're the home side or the opposition. So that's a critical thing which they probably have to iron out. How do you do that? Well, make sure you've got conditions like, 2 days ago. Make sure there is no moisture. You'd rather have it turn. So take Sydney Showgrounds, for example. That's been really dry and it does turn. And it still makes for a good competitive game, whether it turns or not. It's a challenge for the batters, and you don't have those huge blowout games, but it is a restful for the cricketers to manufacture their way to score runs. And I love that.
It's a bit of a grind.
It's a grind, and I love watching how people go about it. And we've actually seen good players like Ollie Davies dropped because he hasn't been able to manufacture his way through this tough period. Correct. So good players get it done, no matter what the conditions. And I probably will say that about the Melbourne Renegades, that they haven't adapted quick enough to be able to get scores on the board to make their bowling unit be able to work through that.
So Jake Fraser McGurk gets the runs. Take us into his mind, which is difficult. just in relation to the courage shown to be able to, and the belief in himself to be able to do that before the end of the season. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't a dead rubber when he got those runs.
It felt like a dead rubber,
It did
though,
feel
didn't
like it,
Yeah.
but the reality is, as of when their game was finished,
Yeah.
they were inside the top 4. So it was a performance of obviously merit, but also of consequence.
Look, it's a sense of relief. I would have thought this has been a nightmare season for him. It would have been tough. It would have been mentally hard. He would have received, I don't know, messages and all sorts of advice from people from not even his close inner sanctum, but outside that. And to be honest, when you're playing bad, you don't need external help. You've got enough people close to you to be able to manufacture that way. But some way, everyone thinks that they can help.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, Jake doesn't ring up your work and tell you when you've had a crap day and manufacture your way through it. So I'm really happy for him that he had the courage to be able to continue the way he plays. And we always said this, get the right conditions. When the ball's swinging and seaming, if you don't have any footwork, you're going to be challenged. Now, he has 0 footwork. So that's the way it's going to roll for Jake for a long period of time. So you've just got to bear with it that he needs conditions to be not perfect, but close to perfect to be able to do what he did. And I think I heard Cameron talk about he really liked the way that the process started for him. I think he was 10 off 10 balls. So got himself in, picked some targets, and then nailed those targets. And it was great to watch.
What are the Heat thinking at the moment? Because they had the game against the Hurricanes at home. Their test stars come back.
Yeah.
They totally botched it. Then the same thing happened against the Renegades from a position of real strength that they weren't able to defend. Is that going to play on their minds? Is it going to force a rethink, or is it just they caught 2 teams, particularly a couple of players, hot on the day, and it is what it is?
No, you look at the season in a whole, and I think that they will probably – I don't think they'll use injury as an excuse, but it certainly didn't help having Michael Neser out at the start of the season. When you change your bowling lineup and it's a title-winning bowling lineup of Neser, Johnson, Bartlett, Swepson, and Kuhneman.
It's a good 5.
And then Tall Paul to roll some overs out. That's a winning attack.
Yeah.
You rip one of those out, and then you rip Kuhneman out as well. That's really hard. Xavier Bartlett missed a couple of games as well. So there's all of a sudden your game plan changes, and we saw Tall Paul bowl a couple of overs which didn't match up to him when they played the Melbourne Stars, and Marcus Stoinis pumped him all over the Gabba. Little things like that their squad wasn't able to adapt perfectly. Now, it's a couple other things as well. Their batting hasn't clicked as well as it should. Couple of players have done well, but then again, changing your batting lineup. People come in, people come out. It creates uncertainty, and it's as I said, when you get that continuity, and that's what the Sixers do so well. They represent the same side, they get the same players, and everyone knows what they do. They have a few little ins and outs, like Steve Smith come in and come out, but pretty handy player to come in and out, isn't he, Steve Smith? But yeah, that's that sort of this disjointed of Heat performance this year, I reckon, has been put onto the park.
The Strikers and the Scorchers, it's kind of emblematic of their season that both knew they had to win and win well. It was a weird sort of game. Again, Strikers in the field made some interesting decisions. Scorchers, again, they weren't, as you said before, uncharacteristic in the way they played, and in the end they both miss out. But Cooper Connolly, again, continues to step up to the plate.
Yeah. Well, I'm wrapped for him. He won the Bundaberg Ginger Beer Player of the Tournament in our broadcast, so he deserves it as well. He's one that's talk about adapting to conditions.
Yes.
I think this is a really good lesson for anyone to look at and learn, particularly as a young player. And I remember him batting at the Marvel Stadium when everyone else struggled. He was probably 20 runs at the halfway mark, ended up with 66, I think, somewhere around that sort of figure. And he was miles off the pace. And he was in great touch leading into that game and just sort of manufactured a way to get to a score to let their team win. And I thought that was a really good professional performance about adjusting to conditions. And then he goes over to the West, belts them everywhere. And I just think it's been a great performance on the back of, I think, some real confidence through some Shield cricket, but also Australian selection. Even though he didn't play a big role, broke his hand. I think it was just that significance of getting a Australian cap that lifts your elevation to say, hey, I'm a gun player, and people are going to come and watch me. And now they've actually got to be very wary of me. So being elevated from a number 6 sort of lower order slogger to a number 3 gun player, that's recognition. So I'm wrapped for him. He's gonna make a serious impact in Sri Lanka as well. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, and not only has he leapfrog players in his own team this year, by not just the order, but I think just the quality. He's now making a real name for himself around the country, and I'm with you. And Mike Hussey actually referenced the same game against the Renegades as almost the coming of age innings, that it's not just about clearing the fence. It's actually thinking your way through a situation for someone so young was impressive. All right, just whipping through this next power play item. It's a simple question. Who do you trust more, the Hurricanes or the Sixers? They'll play each other for a spot in the final, a direct entry into the final.
Yeah.
1 versus 2. It's at Ninja Stadium. I'm not sure whether that makes any difference, but who do you trust more?
Look, I would trust the Sydney Sixers on past history. Are you talking about whether I trust them to get the job done, or who do I think will win?
I think I'll broaden it out a little bit so we can narrow our focus on the games later. But going into a final series, who are you trusting more?
Probably trusting Moses Enriquez and his side, just because they've been there a number of times and know how to win and been in finals so many years that they know how it feels like. And I think that in tough games, they get jobs done. We've heard that from Moses Enriquez, that he believes that their side's an intelligence side. So under pressure, particularly in finals, it's a handy asset to have.
I think that's well answered. I do tend to agree with you. Player movement window. This is a relatively new thing. The commentary sort of through the last round of the home and away matches was as much on who's staying, who might be going, as much as who's going to play finals. And some fascinating little tidbits have come out of it, really, when you think about the Scorchers, Behrendorff, Ty and Mitch Marsh not being recontracted at this point. So each club, for those that are listening to this or watching this, you can confirm 10 players on your list, not 15, not 14, not 12, 10. So it means that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't be playing at their club next year, but what it means is that they're available for others to go and grab.
Yeah.
So
why 10? How'd they come up with that figure?
I don't know why, but it's probably a teasing number, isn't it? That you can. It's not 11, which is how many you need for a team. But I think it's more. Yeah, it's getting people thinking, and I know for a fact that the clubs, their list managers, their coaches are spending probably more time on that than actually on the cricket at the moment to get it right. So it's all been formalised.
Yeah, I'd say it's a real distraction, actually.
I was going to ask you about that, whether you felt – I like the concept. I think it's an interesting concept, but what sort of impact it might have?
Just my thought process is you should be able to contract someone at will whenever you want, whether it's in the middle of June or 2 weeks ago. So if you want someone to represent your club and you're willing to pay them money for it, then you should secure their services whenever they want. If they want to agree to it, great. I like the theatre, I guess, of the desperation to secure players on the last day before the home and away season. So that's pretty cool. Be an absolute mad scramble for the cash pool to be divvied up evenly.
It's like spending your Christmas vouchers before the sales finish.
It is, yeah. And I guess, I love that sort of strategic management of lists because not only do you have to work out for the now which 10 players you're going to secure, what are you going to pay them, and then what have you got left in the pool to represent the other 8 players that you got a contract as well. So I love that strategic management of it. Hey, look, it's fun. It gets the high-performance managers working through the big bash instead of sitting there eating filet mignon steaks, watching the cricket. So it's good. Love it.
So I mentioned before about Behrendorff, Ty and Marsh are now free agents from the Scorchers.
Yeah. That's big, you know.
It is.
Like, that's big news.
It is a sign that they're transitioning. I don't think there's any question about that. Tim David hasn't re-signed at the Hurricanes. So he's going into a final series with the Hurricanes with no commitment for next year. Renshaw and Swepson, no contracts yet at the Heat, which I think is interesting.
So when can they be contracted here? I'm a little bit torn. When can it happen? Because there's an embargo period somewhere. So what happens to those players not signed? So they can't be signed from now till the end of the final. Is that right?
It's a limbo. Yeah, it's a state of limbo essentially for these players.
So this is an opportunity for these players to really go out and showcase their talents to other clubs and say, I'm ready and willing if you want to pay some cash.
Kane Richardson and John Wells haven't been recontracted at the Renegades. So, yeah, that's probably the main talking points of what's happened yet. So Webster's the other one that there's a feeling that Bo Webster is going to go back
strong rumor, isn't there,
to the purple.
Yeah.
And who knows, we may see a situation where Tim David swaps and goes to the team in green. The Renegades are shopping. There's no question about that. What they end up with, I'm not sure. But we keep hearing that Behrendorff has been linked to a move to the red team.
Yeah, right.
But I reckon there's a few others that they're shopping around for as well.
Well, it has been known for the Melbourne players to get a few washed up Perth extras, isn't it? In the past history, I'd much rather see them blood what we've got here in Victoria because there's some serious talent. I'm not saying that Jason Behrendorff isn't a gun. He's a gun, but he's 36, right? So what value do you get in getting Jason Behrendorff over from the West? And this is the question I have to anyone. If Adam Voges and the West don't value what Jason Behrendorff brings to that club, why do the West? Why do the rest? Yeah?
Yeah.
So that's all I'll say about that. I think he's a gun and I'd secure him on a list. But if the West, who's someone that's been there for a long period of time, go, ooh, we just reckon he's on the downslide here. That's the only reason you can get rid of him. He's past his best. Why does someone else then think that's a willing punt? Because he'll want a 2 or 3 year deal. I don't think anyone over the age of 35 should get anything but a 1 year deal. But that seems to be the opposite in Big Bash. We throw out 5 year deals. I don't know how you can even secure a 5 year deal in a cricket fraternity because your form fluctuates that drastically from 1 year to the next. But I wouldn't give any more than 2 year deals. But hey, the managers push it. They want security for their players. You know what? In sport, there's no security. So it's your job to perform, and performance is up to you.
So I've got one more question before we take a break, and it's a difficult one.
Yeah.
It's from something you've just said. Is there a responsibility for the Big Bash clubs to look after their state programs by developing players to make them well-rounded cricketers in a Big Bash? So you talked before about the Renegades. If they go and shop for 2 or 3 other players to make them better at the expense of some of the younger Victorian players, is it their responsibility to develop Victorian players or is it their responsibility to win?
Geez, Whitey, you're eating into a debate that could be debated for a best part of a month, I reckon. Look, I'll be brutally honest in this. This is where Sydney Thunder and the Melbourne Renegades in particular have a disadvantage against the other clubs. Strikers, Perth Scorchers, Brisbane Heat, even the Sydney Sixers for a best part of it have been able to secure a lot of their local talent, whether that's through because they play for Cricket New South Wales or South Australia, I'm not sure. But it seems to be that those 2 clubs who don't have an attachment struggle to secure local talent. Now, you can argue that the pitch is no good either. And that's an area that needs to be looked at to attract talent. But my belief is that you need your best cricketers from your state playing cricket, and it should be the job or the responsibility of that body to make sure they're playing for, at minimum, your clubs. Now, if that doesn't work, then they go elsewhere. It kills me to know that Matt Short's playing for the Adelaide Strikers. It kills me to know that Murphy's playing for the Sydney Sixers when you've got a fair opportunity to secure their services in Victoria. 2 teams. So I'm just picking out Victoria here. But that's where it falls short. So, yes, I do believe that Ollie Peake, who's an extreme talent who we saw just on the weekend, should be playing. Campbell Callaway should be playing. Marcus Harris, they're good players.
Harry Dixon.
Yeah, you've got to be able to turn them into stars for your franchise teams. Now, they're not franchises. So that's an even different conundrum. They're your club teams. So, yes, there is a duty of care for whoever's the charge of those two state-based organisations to make sure their best talent is on the park. We've had some pretty good players here in Victoria that have gone on to represent Australia. In T20, you've got to get your good players playing.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Hodgie, because it felt like the Renegades were almost going to be the young Victorian team, the developing team. All the young ones were going to go to the red. Yeah. And that was almost going to be a way of not necessarily a nursery.
Well, I can give you the scoop on that.
It looked like it was going to go in that direction.
I can give you the absolute scoop on that. And the reality is that the Melbourne Stars weren't going to contract these young kids. So the coach at the time, which was Andrew McDonald, who has a strong belief in looking after young players talent-wise, said, well, if you're not going to take him, then we'll take him and put him on our list and nurture him through there. To me, that's smart business. Who wants to see your best players go interstate unless there's opportunity for them to play? So it's pointless your best talent going interstate to play for Adelaide Strikers if they're going to sit on the bench. You might as well sit on the bench in Victoria and learn from your local players as well.
And that's there's a commercial element to it. It is a complex conversation to be had because I can understand Cameron White saying coming in as a new coach, well, I want to win. And no one wants to win more than Cameron White. So this whole thing is, well, we might win 3-4 games with a young emerging Victorian team, or I can go and do this, this and this and have a team that I think can win 7 or 8 games and be going for the title.
Let me tell you something, Adam. Over the last 20 years, Victoria has been a winning culture. They win titles. So they know how to win. Get them into teams that don't know how to win. That's what I'll say.
Brad Hodge is our co-host on The Surge. We'll take a break and we'll preview the finals after this. Welcome back to The Surge with Adam White and Brad Hodge. We're about to preview the finals, but make sure you have the Big Bash app downloaded during the final series. The best way to stay up to date with everything BBL. And we'll get some more information there a little bit later on with how you actually do it. I'm sure most of you have already downloaded the app. But it starts with the finals start with the Hurricanes and the Sixers. It is the qualifier, Ninja Stadium, Tuesday night, depending on when you're listening to this. And we've said throughout the tournament, we feel like these are the best two teams. We've both been pretty keen on the Hurricanes and we've both been historically keen on what the Sixers have done. So it feels right. But the fact that it's in Tasmania as opposed to in Sydney, not so much a disadvantage is that for the Sixers? How much of it is an advantage to the Hurricanes?
Well, it's a huge advantage to the Hurricanes. And I only put that down to the Tim David factor that's just been so dominant at Ninja Stadium, particularly in that power surge. They play the dimensions well. I'm not sure how – I think the Sydney Sixers, they were pretty – smart at adapting. That's the one thing they're good at. Yep. They've got a good creative bowling lineup. It will certainly help Mitch Owen and Tim David immensely, and then Nathan Ellis and Chris Jordan with their bowling units. So I think they're quite a little bit vulnerable with their spin options, the Hobart Hurricanes, and they've been hammered a little bit with their bowling stocks, but they'll get Riley Meredith back, who's a huge, important inclusion into that side.
They've got him back at the right time. McDermott played against the Stars off that hamstring issue. Jordan missed a couple of games, destroyed James, my son, and my Supercoach team, missing those games late in the season. But he's come back just at the right time. They don't look like they're missing much. No. Whereas the Sixers, no Vince, he's gone. I don't know. I just feel like it's almost no excuses for the Hurricanes. Their time is now. They haven't won a tournament to this point. They're set up now. I think from a list strategy point of view, they've been set up extremely well. That they aren't losing a lot of key players ahead of the final series like other clubs.
Yeah, that's critical.
I kind of feel like it's theirs now to win.
Well, it is, and if you run through the top order, so they've got a little benefit there that Caleb Jewell's been able to come in and make an impact at the top, which allows Matty Wade to go down and bat with Tim David.
Do you like that?
I still like Matty Wade at the top, actually, but having said that, though, that partnership of when they're representing Australia, Stoinis, Wade and Tim David was an extremely powerful, beautiful lineup. So I do like Wadey down there with Tim David. And the reason I say that is he's so creative. He finds the boundaries, and he knows that position so well. There's not many people who can play the way Wadey can play. So he's a winner. He knows how to win. So if they are in a tricky situation, he can get them over the line. Whereas there was someone else there, no. So having Caleb Jewell at the top, if he wants to play with that sort of left-hand freedom at the top, it's a bit of a shot to nothing with Mitch Owen going so hard at the other end. So it's a real benefit, that left and right-hand combination, and having Matty parked down there as another left-hander where they've been vulnerable in the past, the Hobart team, having sort of one lineup that's the same. They always had 3 left-handers at the top and then they had 0. So they've stretched it out quite nicely there.
It's a luxury to have Wade down there because of Mitch Owen. So we talk about Cooper Connolly announcing himself as a serious player over a tournament as opposed to an innings here and innings there. Yeah. What Mitch Owen's been able to do is to give not only a lot of power at the top, but give so much more flexibility and options for the Hurricanes.
Yeah.
I kind of like what it's done to the entire order, not just what it does at the top.
Well, he hasn't got out early too much. That's the thing. So he's been able to hammer, 20s, 30s, even 100s, impactful in a quick time. So that enables that sort of middle order just to take its time a little bit. So McDermott to get in, particularly against spin, and then allow Chowdhury to work it round and just sort of back end it a little bit for David and Wade and
balance.
Yeah, so it's a really nice setup that they've got there. If Mitch Owen doesn't get off to a flyer, it'd be interesting to see how they go about that because Wakeham hasn't got any runs at 3. So if he gets in early and Mitch Owen's disappeared back into the dressing room, then that's the sort of thing which the Hobart Hurricanes will have to wrestle with. How do they go about playing that? But we have seen when they've been in trouble this year that the likes of Tim David has been able to step up and manufacture his way through some tough periods and then go on, kick on and smash it around everywhere. So they've got the lineup. Their bowling unit is vulnerable in 2 areas. Opening the bowling. So that Stanlake loss is huge.
I failed to mention that earlier.
Yeah, that's a huge loss because we've seen Bean come in, done okay, slightly expensive. They'll have to toss up whether to play Cameron Gannon or Bean or even go for another spin option. So Hatzoglu potentially. They've had Chowdhury who's bowling a little bit of spin, but he's not a banker for 4 overs. So again, little bits of holes there that I'm sure the Sydney Sixers will identify and put them under extreme pressure in those areas, or try to anyway.
So the firepower of the Hurricanes up against the intelligence of the Sixers, that might be the theme for that game. The other one we're going to preview is Wednesday night. It's the Thunder and the Stars. It's the knockout. So the winner of that will play the loser of the Hurricanes and the Sixers on Friday night. So we've got the Stars on this amazing run of momentum that we talked about earlier. The Thunder are an interesting team because it felt like when they had Sams and Bancroft collide, it just felt like it just finished. Their season was done there. They'd started the season well, but you think, with the players they've got out, they can't possibly keep going, and they kind of coughed and spluttered, but then they came good again late. Yeah. So it's hard to pick the winner here.
It's an extremely difficult one, actually, this one. If it was played at the MCG, I think Melbourne Stars win comfortably. With it being played at the showgrounds, it brings the Thunder right back into the play.
So you talked about the grind of what you have to be at NG Stadium.
Yes.
Can the Stars grind?
Well, I'm not sure if they can with the way they've been playing. So grind, I don't think it's in their capability.
It's not their DNA.
They've got some huge I'll tell you where their biggest issue is. That's right at the top. Sam Harper he's not looking like getting a run, unfortunately, at the moment. And Rogers as well, who's been in good touch.
Two guys that have played really well for Victorian white ball cricket haven't been able to translate it across.
And just technically there's a couple of things as well which has been exposed that it's hard to eradicate in a short period of time. That's a real issue. And if I was Peter Moores, I'd be really wrestling with making a change there. And absolutely throwing a real curveball at the Sydney Thunder team right now.
So the curveball that has been spoken about is the potential for Peter Hanscom to be brought into the squad and to potentially be the keeper.
Yeah.
So he obviously wouldn't bat at the top, but
Yep.
potentially sort of bat middle order.
Yep.
He's one of the co-hosts of The Surge, so it would be great to get a co-host as a member of a final series.
Look, it's a big call.
Is that something that you would entertain as an option?
I would, because I'd be considering putting Marcus Stoinis to the top. And the reason I say that is that they have got some vulnerability in that middle order against spin, apart from Maxwell. Like Stoin is a gun player of spin, but vulnerable slightly early if you've got a chink in your armour. Hilton Cartwright's not a great player of spin. So they're going to have Tanveer Sangha. And this is the way I'm thinking that the Thunder will roll out. They'll have Tanveer Sangha, they'll have Chris Green, and they'll have Tom Andrews. So there's 12 overs of spin you've got to navigate. Now, we know Peter Handscomb's a gun player of spin. So if there's ever a change that needs to be made, it's going to be courageous and it's going to be now. So how they do that, whether they got the courage to do it, but that's how titles are won.
So they're not asking Handscomb to go out and get 60 off 20 balls. It might be a 35 off 27, rotating the strike and getting that grind into their innings and having others bat around him potentially through those middle overs.
Yeah, and don't forget Peter Handscomb's got 100 in BBL cricket, so it's not like it's impossible. It's just an area which is blatantly staring straight down your eyes going, this is not working.
So Bo Webster leaves.
Yep.
So there needs to be a change irrespective of things.
Correct.
Now, Webster is more a middle order player. He's batted a bit at 4 as well.
Yeah.
But this is why the conversation is been having is that there's a spot.
Yeah.
Handscomb can keep.
Yeah.
Handscomb can play spin. Handscomb can play middle order. And for whatever reason with Sam Harper, who is keeping extremely well, playing very well for Victoria, just hasn't happened for him through the tournament in green.
Oh, it's a complete mystery, isn't it?
It is.
You know, unfortunately for Sam, he's trying to hit shots against balls that aren't there and trying to create things, and it just hasn't worked for him. So he's really struggled. But yeah, who they've got on their list to come in other than that, maybe John Merlot can play a deeper role if they want to move someone, if that heavy hitting up the top. The reason I say it, that it's critically important, is from the games that I have broadcast at NG Stadium, all the damage is done in the first 4 overs. So we've seen Constas, we've seen Warner, everyone's scoring heavily in that power play because they know that as soon as the spinners come on, the game changes. The wicket's been dry.
Yeah.
It's not going to be juicy. It's going to be dry. So you have to set up that way to manufacture that. So it's a real, the game's going to be go out and go hard in the power play. That'll be a 10 and over, exercise. Then it'll go back to around 6-7 runs and over up until that 13 over mark when you take the power surge, and maybe 10 to 12 from there. That's been the history. That's the way it's going to structure up. So if you go hard in that middle period, probably the only person that can pull it off is Glenn Maxwell. So that might be an opportunity to then put him at 4 or just mess around. This is the conundrum of being a coach, right? Because Glenn Maxwell's nailed it at number 6. He bats at number 4 for Australia in T20 cricket. Why? Because that's when the spinners come on and Glenn Maxwell disrupts every spinner and every strategy that you have to get your spinner on. So if Glenn Maxwell's at the crease, David Warner can't bowl Tom Andrews. He can't bowl Tanveer Sangha. He can't bowl Chris Green. He can. It's a big punt though. So that's what Glenn Maxwell does. So if you're in a good space, you can just tinker with your order a little bit to take away your opposition's strengths. Now's the time.
In a final series when they've kept it fairly that continuity. So last question for you. So the David Warner captaincy versus the Marcus Stoinis captaincy. Do you see an advantage there for the Thunder because of Warner's captaincy against someone who's relatively new at it? It does feel, again from the outside, that that Warner's really thrived with the captaincy. He's playing really well, but he's also got the players playing really well for him.
I don't think there's an advantage. I think we've seen what the advantage is, and that's getting the Sydney Thunder to the finals. I think both Marcus Stoinis and Davey are actually pretty smart, intelligent cricketers on the field to be able to manipulate their bowling units. What Davey has done is elevate their fielding as well. So that's critically important. He's getting at least 10 or 15 runs saved out of his fielding unit because he's a gun fielder and he's shown him what's required. On the flip side of that, Glenn Maxwell's also on the field for the Melbourne Stars, and they fielded brilliantly last night. That was one thing that stood out compared to the Hobart Hurricanes. They were miles better in the field, and of course, the result was simple. So, will it play an advantage? I think that one thing I'm hoping is that David Warner doesn't go into a batting shell because he feels he has to carry that side deep into the 16th, 17th over. I think to win against the Melbourne Stars, he has to play a pretty aggressive game. So, look, we'll see. It's a conundrum. I think the conditions will play a big role, and whoever plays the conditions better will win. It's going to be a challenge.
And in Sydney, we just got to hope it doesn't rain. Thank you very much for joining us today. Great going. It's actually got me excited about these two games. They really do set up fantastically well. We'll do it again later in the week. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Brad Hodge, our co-host on The Surge. As I said, if you haven't already, make sure you download the Big Bash app to get all the news, all the behind-the-scenes footage, and all the information ahead of what shapes as a wonderful final series BBL 14. We'll catch you again later in the week.